looking at the food prices that continue to rise. What is the impact that this has on the nation's most vulnerable? Of course, now that the households need 5,383 rand 38 cents, of course, for that average household basket there. And so as we look at what the impact this is also going to have in terms of nutrition, in terms of, just desperation and also hunger at large, we were just shining a spotlight on the cost of living and how this is obviously being impacted by high unemployment rates as well as slow economic growth. In fact, we're going to continue with our conversation. We've asked you to interact with us on our social media platforms. But as we also seen South Africans at large having now been forced to tighten their spending belts, but only in terms of only buying essential food stuff. But this does not always mean healthy nutritional meals. And so according to a survey that was released by the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, the cost of the average household food basket increased from 136 rand 29 cents from 5,330 rand 30 cents. Of course, this was in May of 2024. It's now increased to 5,466 cents 59 in May of 2025. How dire is the situation? To discuss this a little bit further, we're going to be joined virtually by Mervyn Abrahams, Program Director, Coordinator at Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group. He joins us now on the line for that. Mervyn, a very good morning. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Good morning, Liesl, and good morning to all your viewers.
I think these are pertinent conversations that need to be had given the state of our economy and just the impact that it's had on households at large. If we look at the figures that have now come in, the average household food basket having increased, between May of 2024 and May of 2025. Perhaps you could talk to this increase, talk to the numbers that are coming through, but also how are these calculations also added in?
So Liesl, we have seen food prices in South Africa outstripping the ability of households to budget sufficiently for food for decades now. And we have seen food prices increase at various kind of inflation levels. And as you have just correctly mentioned, over the last year, we have seen a 2.6% increase in the basket of 44 very basic foods that we track. So these are foods like maize meal and rice and flour and sugar and cooking oil and potatoes and onions and frozen chicken pieces and a little bit of eggs and chicken feet and carrots and butternut and spinach. So it's those kinds of foods that most households try to purchase that we are tracking, and 2.6% inflation year on year and 0.9% month on month is indicative that food prices are on the rise again.
Yeah, and Mervyn, thank you for speaking to that because, beyond the issue of affordability, what's also factored in is the issue of nutrition, but also just what is being bought as well, shift in the types of food that is being bought. If we're even just looking at the price of fresh produce, that's come to the fore. We've seen an increase on that front, during the month of May 2025, April 2025. If we look at the prices coming through for onions, for instance, it was priced at 101 rand 30 cents. That increased to 124 and 18 cents. Cabbage, for instance, that increased from 44 and 78 cents to 45 and 57 cents. And that was in the same period. Talk to us about the impact that this has on families, on nutrition, affordability as well, in terms of fresh produce.
So, Liesl, what women tell us is that when these fresh produce, in particular things like onions and potatoes and cabbage, when those prices increase, it means that they cannot buy other types of fresh produce. So a household budget is not elastic. It is, you have what you have and you have to get through with that amount of money. So they would purchase, for instance, potatoes and onions because that is necessary to cook a pot of food. But things like spinach and butternut and other things, will get dropped out of the basket. And that is what is contributing to nutritional deficiency because we do not have enough money to purchase the diversity of foods that is required for household nutritional consumption.
And to your point, there are obviously opportunity costs that are going into this, and people are having to forego some of the essential items that really adds to their well-being at large. I mean, even if we're looking at the income that people are receiving, I mean, beyond our exorbitant unemployment rate, talk to us also about the affordability. If we're looking at social grants as well, how little or how enough is that given the dire situation as we speak?
So Lisa, we have to remember that when it comes to food is not the primary focus of the household budget. In fact, we are told, and our research shows, that food is the fourth item of importance. So the households spend their budget first on transport, secondly on electricity, third on debt servicing, and then they are paying on, they buy food. So when we see electricity prices or transport prices increase, for instance, the effect is that there is less money available in the budget to purchase the food. Even if food prices come down, there just isn't enough because electricity prices have gone up and transport prices have gone up. So when you consider that in terms of affordability, and for instance, you look at the national minimum wage, for instance, then we will see that 56% of the national minimum wage goes on two expenses alone, which is transport and electricity. And that leaves something like 2,000 Rand left in the budget to buy all the food that is required. And therein lies the problem. There just is not enough money in the budget, particularly when we're looking towards another 12% increase in electricity prices that will be hitting us in the next month.
It certainly isn't a pretty picture. And, even if we're just looking at the differences in prices for regional areas as well. I mean, if we're looking at the cost of household food baskets in May for a small town like Springbok, it was at 5,879. This was higher than Johannesburg, which was at around 5,610. Talk to us about the disparity in this. Why does Springbok have such a high price for a household basket? Also, what does this mean for smaller towns as compared to the rest of the country?
Yes, Lisa, that's really a very good question because you have just raised the issue of the differences between cities and the rural areas. So the fact is, the further you are away from where the food is being manufactured and produced, not necessarily grown, but the market where it is sold and where it is being processed, the further you are away from that, the higher the prices you are likely to pay, because now you have to include logistics costs. Because most of our food is carried by trucks across the country, and that is why the price of petrol plays such an important role in terms of food prices. So away from the food processing centers, which is closer to Cape Town in that area, the food is, of course, much more expensive.
Well, Mervyn, we're obviously looking at some of the immediate and long-term policies that are going to be needed at this point, of course, to stabilize food prices. But we have come to the end of the conversation. I'm going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you for weighing in. I know the conversation continues. Mervyn Abrahams there joining us via telephone, Program Coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group.